on the association's board. Alhamdulillah. So this community who faced hatred from someone now has justice, inshallah. That's the type of work that we do for people all the time. If you've been watching the news over the last few months, up in Dallas, a woman attacked 2 Muslim children in a swimming pool and tried to drown them. In Georgia, a student criticized her teacher's Israeli flag, and the teacher turned around and threatened to cut her head off. And then you all saw the news in Chicago about Wadia al-Fayoum, who was actually murdered while his attacker, the landlord for the apartment in which they lived, yelled anti-Muslim language. Now, I tell you those 3 stories quickly because those are all children, right? Children who we would think a society will protect no matter what faith they come from. Right, Fayez? Children are important in the story I'm about to tell you. So let me tell you a bit about my job. My job at CAIR is to oversee the research for the organization. So people call CAIR, they say, I've been discriminated against. Our lawyers take the case in, and at the end of the year, they give me all that information. And I take that information and my team turns it into a report. In 2023, CAIR received a total across the whole country of 8,061 complaints. These are people who felt like they had been discriminated against. 8,061. It is the worst year on record since CAIR started keeping records 30 years ago. 30 years ago. So think of what's happened in the interim. 2023 was the worst. Now, the shocking thing about that is the year before was the first time in our history we saw a drop in anti-Muslim cases. So 2022, we see a drop. 2023, we see a huge rise. Does anybody want to tell me what happened in 2023 to cause that? I heard it out in front of me. Real loud, brother. October 2023, you see this giant spike in incoming cases to CAIR. My team, when the lawyers look at a case and they're like, there's a problem here, but we don't need to sue, they give those cases to us to work on. So non-legal advocacy. We were getting 3 or 4 a month in 2022. October happened, 40 cases a week, just my team. There was no way to keep up with that. It's gone down in 2024, but if this was baseline 2022, we're still way up here. Right now, we haven't collected the data for the last half of the year, but as of June, we were on track to pass 2023. So when I say this is the worst wave of Islamophobia on record, we were curious about it. Like, is that really the case? So we went back in time and we looked at the last couple of waves of Islamophobia. Everyone will remember December 2015, then candidate Donald Trump announced his plan to ban Muslims from the country, right? And the Islamophobia in the country went up. And then in January 2017, he implemented that ban, and Islamophobic cases went up. But you can take all the cases that happened in the short time after he announced the Muslim ban, and all the cases that happened after he implemented the Muslim ban, it does not equal what happened to after October 2023. So the primary driver of all of it is Gaza, is the Biden-backed genocide that's happening in Gaza. It's been driving a wave of Islamophobia here in the United States as well. And nothing shocking to any of you, the Biden administration has really done nothing about it. In fact, at times, President Biden has invoked Islamophobic tropes as he tries to justify what his administration is doing. But I want to tell you something that the data shows us and then tell you what we're doing about it, and that's when we'll start our conversation. The data shows us two troubling but interesting things. One of them that relates to children and young people. The places where the most Islamophobia is happening in this country right now, you've seen it in the news, on school campuses, where particularly colleges, so young people, not quite children, but still in their youth, are facing significant discrimination simply from their university administrations, simply for speaking up against genocide. Here in Austin, we saw police deployed violently against protesters at UT Austin. The other place where discrimination against Muslims is happening the most is at work, employment settings. Interestingly enough, work cases outweigh the number of education setting cases we're getting. And what this is, 10 years ago, it would have been I asked for Eid off and my work wouldn't give it to me. Or I wanted to go to Jummah prayer and work wouldn't give it to me. Now, people are going to protests against the genocide, going to work, and HR is calling them in and saying, what is this we see on your social media feed? We've seen numbers of people lose their jobs over things like that. And in many cases, we've been able to intervene in such proceedings. But particularly because many of these are private corporations where the First Amendment doesn't apply, because the First Amendment applies to government, not to private corporations, many of these places have been able to get away with discriminating against their employees. So I'll quickly tell you about what CAIR is doing, and then we'll have, inshallah, a conversation. What we decided to do, because these are, we have 8,061 individuals calling fire. Can I restate it? Okay, yeah, no problem. So the First Amendment, right, it's my First Amendment right to say whatever I want to say, right, actually only applies to government. So Greg Abbott technically can't tell you what you can or cannot say because the First Amendment applies to him. I know he's passed an executive order to try to silence people from criticism of Israel. But technically, the government cannot. A private corporation can do whatever a private corporation wants to do. If they say to you, you can't talk about politics while you're at work, perfectly legal. Got it? Yeah, of course. That one usually shocks people. So you're not the first person to have that reaction. So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to help children, young people? I think one of the first pieces of good news for you is that the young people have done a wonderful job of sticking up for themselves, right? When you look at many of these college campuses, Gen Z, who people used to criticize, they're not real strong, they're worried about other things. Gen Z has shown up. Gen Z has stood on the line while police have come after them. And they have gone back and kept standing up for the value that human beings shouldn't be murdered in a genocide. It is amazing. But what CAIR has started doing now, we have these 8,061 individuals. They get legal services. They get individual help. My team looks at the systemic problem. Colleges across the country are going after our young people. So we started a campaign, we call it the Unhostile Campus Campaign. Its initial piece is we identify universities that are particular violators of rights, and we designate them what we call an institution of particular concern. And when we make that designation, we start advising people who are thinking about working there. We start advising students who are thinking about going there that maybe they should consider going somewhere else that values their viewpoints, that is not going to silence them, that is not going to teach them to be an obedient drone, but understands the Islamic principle, the American value of people speaking up and speaking their minds about things. As that campaign, so far we've designated 14 universities. No shock, UT Austin was one of the first because of the things that they had done. But you can only get so far with sort of negative things like that. So on the other side of it, we have a list of over 800 university administrators that we email on a routine basis now, and we're building it and growing it. And we're putting together things like recommended protest policies that our lawyers have put together for us. Recommended policies on Islamophobia. Because if you can get these institutions to start adopting these kinds of things, then the discrimination that our students are facing isn't something that happens going into the future. And we're working on the exact same type of campaign for corporate settings. So very soon we will start designating various corporations as problematic toward Muslims. And in a global environment where if you want to succeed, there's billions of Muslims you have to work with, those kind of things can have an impact. I've seen that in the past. Many years ago, I ran a campaign against Burger King because they had opened up an outlet in an Israeli settlement, Ma'ale Adumim. And that's on ground that's supposed to be occupied under military occupation, under international law. So we reached out to Burger King years ago, and we said, hey, it's kind of weird to have ground that's under military occupation, but I can walk into your restaurant and get a burger. And they told us to go away, and we started calling corporations in the Arab world who started threatening Burger King, who started saying things like, we're not going to do business with you, we're not going to supply you. After about a month, Burger King forced that outlet to close down. So we know that the Muslim world, as many problems exist in it, when they understand that American corporations may have problems if they abuse their Muslim employees here, when folks overseas hear about it, this campaign should start having an impact on them. And both of those campaigns, and I'll end on this, both of those campaigns are designed to go for years. This isn't months, this is 10 or 15 years. And CAIR has done these kind of campaigns for a while now. The last story I will tell you before I open it up for questions. About 2008, 2009, we learned that the FBI was getting training and had materials from people like Robert Spencer, one of the most notorious Islamophobes in the United States. Kind of problematic that that type of person was teaching law enforcement agents. And then we started identifying a number of businesses where their entire model was to go around to law enforcement all around the country and teach them things like, when Muslims talk to you, they'll lie to you. Mosques are places that Muslims store weapons. Other conspiracy theories. And we spent years going after these businesses. There was one called Understanding the Threat. He went to Culpeper, Virginia. I went to Culpeper, Virginia. I talked to the sheriffs he was training. I told them how problematic the training was. I did a records request, meaning because it's a government institution, I got all of the emails between them and the head of Understanding the Threat, and I got other things like the bill he sent them and his training manual. And then he went to Maricopa in Arizona, and I followed him, but now I have his training manual, and I have experts who have taken apart his training manual, and I can go and I can say, look, here's all the false things he's teaching. And we did this for years. And after about 12 years, that industry is gone. Understanding the Threat closed up in 2022. The FBI purged all the anti-Muslim law enforcement training materials back in 2011, 2012. So I tell you that story because one thing, most people when they hear about CAIR, they're like, yeah, you help people out when they're discriminated against. The other thing I want you to keep in mind as we deal with Islamophobia is we also identify where the problems are and then develop resources and target those problems for years so that those problems go away and your children's children don't have to deal with them. So inshallah, that's the quick message I wanted to bring to you this evening. As always, I'd far rather hear what questions you might have about Islamophobia here in Texas, or Islamophobia in the nation, or anything else you're thinking about Muslims in the United States. Or I can ask you a bunch of really hard, uncomfortable questions. It's a quiz. Let me get this brother first. So the brother is asking about Trump and his plans to target immigrants. It's for me been very, there's an interesting part and then there's the answer to your question. Let me first give you some context. Back in 2016, he was also targeting immigrants, and he was specifically targeting us, right? The Muslim ban. That was like his thing on the campaign trail. This time around, it's changed. It's immigrants from south of the border. So we were joking earlier, my mother is from Scotland. Like, she's an immigrant, and she is not, like, who they're talking about, right? It's not going to be a problem for her. We are a subset of those immigrants when he talks about it. Because they think we all, none of us are from here, right? They think we all came from somewhere else. But we come up in those conversations, and you've seen it in the news every so often, right? We found prayer rugs at the southern border. The terrorists who were crossing the border left them behind. It's like, has any of you ever left a prayer rug behind? Like, I haven't. Maybe other people are less organized, but it's a scare tactic, right? It's a scare tactic every so often that they bring into the conversation. So I would argue to you, brother, it's like we as a community are not the main target this time. Does that mean we leave our allies to fend for themselves? No. Sharia, if you boil it down, be a benefit to humanity, avert harm from humanity, right? That's what I learned. Everybody else here learned the same thing? And humanity is not Muslims, right? It's everybody. So we are amping up. We are reestablishing our relationships with many people in the immigrants' rights movement. And let's just face it. Is there any part of our faith that accepts some of the images that we saw during that last round of deportations, right? Families torn apart. Muslims have to oppose that, right? Human beings treated like animals. We have to oppose that. So, yes, we are, right? There's rules. There's rules about how you come to the country. We're Muslims, believe in, the rules are the rules. There are values as well. And so we're gearing up to make sure that those values that our faith espouses and our nation is supposed to live up to 100%. And we're equally preparing for the idea that within that immigration conversation, there will be a part of it that targets us. But we're not going to leave our allies alone. No, we wouldn't do that. Sure, yeah. Absolutely. So I'll repeat the brothers. The brother had two questions. One, how many lawyers does CAIR have? Way too many. Uh, we have about 80 lawyers on staff across the country as an institution. And before I get to the second part of your question, and I'll repeat the second part of your question for everybody who couldn't hear it, but I want you to think about this as well, because it goes back to your question a little bit about the anticipated immigration fight that's coming up. I started working for a Muslim organization nationally back in 1997, so I remember like back before 9/11 and all of those other things, you know, back when we had it easy. And I can tell you, the Muslim community today is not the Muslim community that faced the 9/11, the aftermath of 9/11. We have bigger institutions, right? And anybody lived here in Austin long enough to remember how many masjids were there here in 2001? Like 2? I hear there's 13 now. So here in Austin, you see it. The community has grown. And the masjids that we pray in, when I first embraced Islam in Washington, D.C., there were 2 masjids. There was the Islamic Center of Washington, D.C., which is the embassy mosque, right? All the embassies in D.C. that are Muslim helped build that. And then there was Masjid Muhammad, which was a former Nation of Islam mosque. And that was your choice. And then initially there were all these little rooms that you would go to. And you would be in this little room that fit maybe 20 people, but somehow there would be 50 cars double parked outside in the parking lot. Now we're praying in giant, beautiful Islamic centers like this. So our community is much stronger now. For CAIR, in 2009, we had 1 attorney on staff. Very overworked brother named Arsalan. Now, we have 80 attorneys on staff. But the key thing that's changed in my book is when we first really started hiring lawyers, a lot of them were just straight out of law school, just got barred. Today, we have some of the foremost experts in the country on certain types of law. The foremost legal expert in the country on the federal watch list is one of CAIR's attorneys. This brother started right out of law school, 2009, 2010. His first real case. Does anybody else remember when Oklahoma passed a law that would have allowed them to discriminate against Muslims? It's called an anti-Sharia bill. Oklahoma passed it by 72%. Gadir, the lawyer, had just started with us. I walked down the hallway to Gadir and I said, "You're going to sue Oklahoma." And he was like, "Right on, let's do it. Love it." And we did. We sued. He was just out of law school. Ultimately, the ACLU took that case for us. They won that case. But Gadir kept practicing. Earlier this year, he won a 9-0 decision in front of the Supreme Court against the federal watch list. So when I say that we have all these attorneys on staff, the other thing is we have expertise in-house now that can win 9-0 in front of the Supreme Court. So we are not the community that we were 20 years ago. There is a lot more power in the community. Is it enough? Allahu alam. Allah makes the decisions. We just do the best we can. Now, the brother's second question was on a different topic, so that's why I'm treating them so separately. He asked me about India, Narendra Modi, and the presence of Hindutva here in the United States. And be very clear. We are very aware that groups that support Narendra Modi and his ideology that transforms India from the vibrant multicultural nation that it is into there's only one type of people that we will respect and accept. We know there are groups in this country who are working hard to defend that particular viewpoint. We address it in a couple of different ways. We have partner organizations. The brother, when he was asking the question, you know, he acknowledged, right, there's a lot of different international issues to deal with. We can't keep up with all of them. There are other organizations that are experts. So Indian American Muslim Council, Hindus for Human Rights are the two I deal with the most on this issue. And I essentially go, look, CAIR's resources, we have all these attorneys, we're really good at the media, tell us what you need, help us to understand the specifics of the political situation, and we'll go out and do it. So we work together with groups like that. When Modi came and quite shamefully was hosted in front of Congress and at the White House, we were very present, particularly in the media, making sure that Americans understand the complicated picture in India, and that understand that he is currently involved in repressing minorities to the point where India is on a genocide watch. So we deal with it that way. We have also, in many ways, you know, had a number of, for lack of a better word, run-ins with some of the groups you're talking about, with one of the most famous being in New Jersey a year ago, I think it was. They had a bulldozer in an India Day parade, like, look, celebrate India Day, nobody cares. The bulldozer, though, is a symbol of the destruction of Muslim homes. And when we pointed that out to people, right, taking the expert knowledge that other groups have, when we pointed that out to political leadership in New Jersey, it became a big problem. And they ultimately had to apologize for having it in the parade. So we're involved in sort of direct pushing back against the agenda that those groups have. I just wanted to use that as one example. I got two other questions. I am going to go up to the sister upstairs because she's standing up, like, waving down at me. So if I don't acknowledge that, fruit's going to come down on me. I understand. So, I'll ask you to do that, actually, because I have an answer for you. I'm not dodging your question.
Tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., we have a fundraising dinner for CAIR Austin, which is organizing this program, and Brother Corey Saylor is going to be speaking. And it's right here down the road at the Cedar Park Community Center, is that what it's called? Cedar Park Recreation Center, so literally like 7-8 minutes down the road. So inshallah, everybody, mashallah, as you can see that, you know, he has a lot of ground knowledge that we hear about the surface level. He knows what's happening behind it. So inshallah, I'd like to encourage everyone to not only attend yourself, but also reach out to other people who are interested in this stuff to inshallah come and attend that program as well. And lunch will be at 2:30. And then the program, inshallah. So inshallah, it's a reason for you to come on time. Thank you.
Inshallah. And they can talk to Fayez. Raise your hand if you would, please, brother. And y'all are kind of sort of concealed in the dark over there. I see now. All right. So, social media. What the sister was asking, she said she's a recent graduate. Alhamdulillah, congratulations. Well done. Less than 10% of people in the world have college degrees, so good for you. And she's looking for a job. And as she looks for a job, there is concern because, let's face it, realistically, After you read the resume, what are you going to look at? Social media. So my advice to you comes in a couple of different forms, sister. First of all, I would not take it down, with a caveat, and I'll get to the caveat in a second. After October, in the October, November, December period, I saw more people get fired than I have ever at any point in time, right, for being Muslim, for speaking up. And there was a lot of panic among people because I'm losing my job, I'm losing my income. Just about everybody I worked with back then, when I call them up now, they're like, oh, I got a better job. And I say that to you not to be flip, but to point out, you don't want to work for people who are going to hire you, who aren't going to hire you because you have opinions about genocide, right? I thought I was taught, like in elementary school, genocide is wrong. I'm very certain I was taught apartheid is wrong in elementary school, right? There was that whole South Africa thing. So objecting to that is absolutely what you should be doing. So the caveat is how you talk about it. So there are, you do you. I'm never going to stop somebody from saying what they want to say. But when I criticize the state of Israel, I criticize the state of Israel and their policies. I don't scream, I don't curse, I don't yell, say anything, I don't say nasty. And I say this, and I'm not talking about you at this point, I'm talking about people that I've dealt with for, over the last year and a half. There have been some people who have gotten upset and they've said stuff that I have advised them to take down. Because it was like, you know what, you lost your head for a minute. What you posted not only isn't Islamically what I would say, but it actually hurts our cause. So take that down. So when you look at your posts, if it's things like, I oppose genocide, and I think the people in Palestine shouldn't face a genocide, and hey, wouldn't it be wise if President Biden stopped sending weapons to them, I would leave that in place. Because the people who you want to hire you will look at that and be okay with it. If it says other harsh things, right? Those kind of things I would consider taking down. But ultimately, that decision is yours. I have full confidence from all those people that I have talked to, who told me ultimately they ended up, in many cases with better jobs, that it will all work out. It might be a longer path, but it will all work out. Thank you. I saw two hands down here, brother here, and then I think it was you, Achi. Understood. So the brother's question was, we hear about AIPAC. We don't seem to see anything as influential coming from our perspective. And also, is CAIR coming up with something of that nature, and am I allowed to talk about it? Kind of. I'll stay within the rules 100%. So I want you all to think and remember something. We hear a lot about AIPAC, the ADL, and other groups. And they're good at what they do, but they're institutions. And I don't think we should be in the business of giving them more credit than they deserve. And I certainly think we should not be in the business of not doing our work, our proactive work, because we're worried about whatever they're doing. If I have seen anything over the last year, right, let's all just be very straightforward. We want the genocide to end. We want U.S. weapons to stop going. President Biden should stop that right now. That hasn't happened. So we haven't achieved our goal, right? Let's just be honest. But within that, in my 30 years in this work, we have more allies and more strength than I've ever seen on this subject. And if it was many other subjects, we would have done much better. But there is a strong lobby. And that lobby includes groups like Christians United for Israel. Like, let's not forget that. This is not one ethnic group or religious group against another here in the United States, right? It is, do you support genocide or do you oppose genocide? Because when I go to the rallies, who do I see there with me, right? Opposing genocide next to me are other Muslims. I have Christians there. I have Jews there. I have Arabs there. I have African Americans. I have Asian Americans. I've got everything. So this is a very, very diverse group of people, not one ethnic group versus another. On the C4, what I can tell you is go to CAIRaction.com. So, that's the rules. But what the difference between what CAIR, what I work for, a C3 does and a C4 does, a C3 is limited. We can't involve ourselves in elections, whereas the other organization, CAIR Action, they can endorse candidates, they can fund candidates, they can do many other things. We cannot, but we don't coordinate with them because that's also against the rules. They're their own institution. I think brother over here has been very patient with me. So I'll stay here and repeat it because I just want to make sure I understood you. You're saying that at work, some employers are good about letting people speak, others are not, and some actually have an agenda, a hidden agenda really to support the genocide movement, and how can we prove that? Okay. That can be really hard sometimes. At risk to themselves, to their employment, and to being sued, some employees have come forward and shared information with us and with news organizations about what's going on inside their companies. So how do we prove that? Sometimes it's only by getting the internal documents from the corporations or someone being willing to stand up and say something about it. One of the most prominent examples that I can cite off the top of my head, it was shown that Facebook, let me be very careful, it was alleged that Facebook was suppressing tweets coming from, or posts coming from Palestine, more so than they were posts coming from Israel in the immediate aftermath of October. And documents demonstrating that were given to the Wall Street Journal, who reviewed them and posted them. So that's one way that someone was able to get information about the kinds of things that you're talking about out into the public. Now, I will also say that we've had a number of employees. One of the things that we observed, and you did too, like this isn't shocking, right after the latest round of Israel-Palestine violence got started, right? And it didn't start last October, right? All this stuff's been going on for decades. It's been cycles of it. But right after this latest round got started, many corporations issued statements standing with Israel. We support Israel, in violation of their own diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, because when you say, I stand with Israel, what you're saying is, what's coming, right, and we now know it's a full-blown genocide, is okay, right? You're telling your employees who stand with the Palestinians that they don't matter. So we saw that these folks weren't hiding it. we saw corporations threaten students. Like one guy, even one CEO, I forget the company, went to his alma mater, Harvard, and said, give me the names of the students who are speaking up for Palestine. I'll make sure I never hire them. Private corporation, as long as he's not taking government money, he can say that. I would say to that, like, to what we just had, that conversation we just had with the sister up there. You want the expertise that exists within our community? We don't want to work for you, right? We're not going to stand by that. We would hope that corporations in the Muslim world would begin to, more aggressively say, if you're going to say those kind of things, we don't want to work with you. And I think we can push some of them in that direction. So, yes, there's a hidden agenda. I will tell you, I have my hands full trying to deal with the just overt agenda at this point in time. But where there is things that are going on inside corporations, if folks have internal documents, they have brought them to journalists, they have brought them to organizations like ours, and we are very rigorous in making sure we protect people who come to us. I have a whole trove of documents from a very well-known tech company that we decided not to release because we couldn't protect the people who gave them to us. They hadn't taken some steps early on to cover their digital footprints. So we will take care of that and make sure that kind of information. I have a hand here, and then I'm going to come over to you, brother. And I'm just checking upstairs to make sure I'm not missing any hands as well. Yeah, please. So the brother is asking me about knowledge sharing among attorneys, whether there's a database that sort of gives access to all the precedents that are coming out of many of these lawsuits and, things that come before that can be used as precedent to argue a lot of these cases. Not to my understanding at this point. I do know that our attorneys coordinate constantly with attorneys outside of our organization. So conversations are certainly happening. A searchable database, that I'm not aware of at all. That one of the balancing acts that we have to perform at CAIR on a regular basis is, as an institution, our promise, if you get discriminated against and you call me, I have to provide services to you, right? Individual justice matters. That's a big deal with us. At the same time, the point that you're very validly making is that sometimes what you want to do is file lawsuits that deal with the systemic problem, because that way, hopefully you as an individual will never call me because I've solved it. And we do that. And sure. I think that, as I noted, the watch for our attorneys, they decided years ago the watch list is a big one with them. So if you're not familiar with the watch list, it is essentially a Muslim surveillance tool. When you go to the airport, anybody here get pulled over on a regular basis at the airport? I used to. My name's Saylor. I don't know how that happened to me. I feel betrayed. But anybody else? All right, a couple of hands down here. Do you get the 4 S's on your boarding pass? All right. The 4 S's are usually an indicator. I haven't had to actually say the word out fully. Special Secondary Screening Selection, I think is what it stands for. Don't quote me on that one. It's been years since I've said it out loud. And what that means is you're going to get pulled aside and you get extra screening. When you come back to the country from overseas, you get pulled aside and asked a bunch of questions. Some of the questions that we've tracked over the years, when you're coming back from overseas, they're essentially able to ascertain, are you a citizen or a valid visa holder, and are you eligible to enter the country? That's what they're supposed to do at immigration stations, right? And did you bring any fruit back, right? We've all got that question. But one of the questions that we see being asked of Muslims, particularly those on the watch list, what's your favorite verse of the Quran? Who prays next to you in the mosque? Other things like that that have nothing to do with, am I a citizen? What's that? Our attorneys have assembled a list. There's like 7 or 8 that we see all the time. Oh, let me sort of deal with. I'm going to the side of a question for him. Let me come back to remind me in a second, okay? So, the federal watch list is a secret thing that is given to governments, corporations. We know of people who have been denied jobs because apparently their name was on the watch list. By accident, a regional air carrier put a version of the 2019 version of the federal watch list online. So, it's supposed to be secret, but they put it online and a hacker got a hold of it. Perfectly okay. I mean, the hacker wasn't hacking anything, it was online. Gave us a copy of it. We gave it to a data analysis company and we said, here's a list of Muslim names, Aisha, Muhammad, right? All that stuff. All the very common ones, not Corey, obviously. And we said, how many names on our list match the watch list? 98%. So when I say it's a Muslim surveillance tool, 98% feels convincing. Hang on one second, I'm getting back to you. So our folks made that a priority, and we hack away at that. The Gaza issue, legally speaking, and a lot of the associated stuff with it, such as the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, such as the anti-BDS measures, like one of which was implemented here in Texas, is all sort of new legal territory. There are some decisions out there, but I'm not aware of anybody that's built a database to put together all of that stuff. But I do know the folks that are litigating it. So you have some in the ACLU, some in CAIR, some in other organizations, some in private practice. They all talk to each other. Well, that's a good question, too. So. We wouldn't be, so he was asking about the watch list if we were able to use the Freedom of Information Act to unveil it. No, we wouldn't get it by dropping a FOIA request on them. Because it's supposed, it's one of those, this is government methods and practices that we don't have to disclose. That's why it should be shocking to anybody that this secretive list was put on the internet by a regional air carrier. We do regularly use information requests for other things, but I haven't seen it successfully used here. So the brother over here kind of pivoted onto another question. I was laying out the questions about that they ask at the border frequently. I am not an attorney. I cannot give you legal advice, so I'm not here to do that. What I can say, and I'm going to parrot back what I have been advised to do, and then I would ask you to talk to your own legal counsel. If they're asking you routine questions, did you bring back any fruit? I have been advised to answer that, but to answer it as short as possible. Did you bring back any fruit? No. Where did you go? Bosnia. What for? Work. Right? Keep it. I'm answering the questions. Because those are routine. When it starts veering into something else, if I am a citizen, my understanding is I can say I don't want to answer that question. I feel like you're moving outside of what's supposed to be asked in this conversation. What that will likely do is make your stay with Customs and Border Protection longer. But ultimately, they can't deny you entry to the country if you're a citizen or a valid visa holder, unless you do actually have fruit or something like that, right? But for declining to answer those questions, ultimately they cannot, but they can make your life miserable. If they take your phone from you, which they are allowed to do, and they say, I see the hand, gotcha, brother. If they take your phone from you, which they're allowed to do, but they say, you have to unlock this for me, you can decline to unlock it for them. Will they probably take it and you won't see it again for 6 or 7 months? Absolutely. But you can, and I would not unlock it for them, right? I always turn off my facial recognition when I'm going across a border thing because they don't have to ask me to unlock it. Like, they just hold it up and I unlock it for them. So the general advice is, right, most interactions with law enforcement are exactly what they're supposed to be. They're going to ask you the questions they have to ask you. When it starts to feel uncomfortable to you, if you're a citizen, then in those interactions, my understanding is you can decline. Once again, though, do talk to an attorney, brother. All right. Ask it, and I'm going to get his question. I'll deal with them both. Oh, let me go over to him and come back to you then. Just keep checking upstairs. Go ahead, brother. Comments make me nervous. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm not, okay. Okay. Let me just repeat that back. He's saying that anything on your phone that's in the cloud can be subpoenaed. I will just again say I'm not an attorney. That's outside my area of expertise. I cannot. He's going back to my statement about people downloading employer information in a legal fashion, but in a way that their employer can't trace. That's outside my area of expertise. And I can't answer that. I get the information down the road. There are other people who are experts in digital security who handle other parts of things. Always within the law, maybe not within what your employer wants. So I actually had to come back to him, and that was my promise, and then you're next, brother. So there's two parts to it. And the first part just went out of my head. Forgive me. Okay. So as far as Governor Abbott has done a couple of things that we've pushed back against. Most recently, I think it was, I don't remember the name of the actual executive order that he issued. I think it was 44, but don't quote me on that. Did I hear a no? No, there's somebody talking on the other side. But essentially what it does is it restricts the rights of Americans and others. The Constitution talks about all persons, doesn't necessarily say citizens, to discuss the political affairs of the state of Israel. Right? It essentially protects Israel from criticism. So we sued them over that. We didn't. We did that on our own. Our attorneys did that, and so far, it was within the last couple of weeks, they won or survived what's known as a motion to dismiss. That's essentially the first major step in any lawsuit, as I understand it, is the defendant will say, this lawsuit is bogus, judge, please dismiss it. And the judge has to evaluate that. And in this case, what the judge said is that the merits of the arguments that we made would likely succeed, and therefore the case can move forward. So we're definitely challenging it, but this is a common thing that's done in politics, right? Free speech is free speech, and politicians do things to undermine that all the time, and knowing that somebody's going to sue, and they're probably going to lose, but they don't care. They've made their political point, right? And it doesn't matter how much tax dollars it costs to defend their political point. So that happens all the time. What was the second part of the question? Oh, that's right. Okay, so he was talking about that his company has statements, or a company has statements that says that things that they produce shouldn't be used to violate international human rights, even though the company is producing things that are being used to violate human rights. And again, probably something that should be evaluated by an attorney. I'm not an attorney. What I hear there immediately, though, is if it's a private corporation and that's a policy, they can choose to enforce that policy or not as they wish. So oftentimes we see those things inserted as lip service, but when the rubber comes to the road, the almighty dollar is driving things. And there have certainly been times when employees have been able to overcome that, but it requires, a systemic pressure campaign. Yeah, sorry to keep repeating it, but you're watching training at work here, right? Not an attorney, not allowed to give legal advice. But my understanding is that is correct, that there does not sound initially to be a legal recourse. I would still consider going to CAIR.com/complaint and filing that with our attorneys, because then two things happen. One, you get attorney-client privilege with our attorneys to talk to them. So that's definitely something I can't give you. If you and I talk about something and I got subpoenaed, I'd have to talk to them about it. An attorney would be like, my client, I don't have to tell you anything. And I would let them assess that and evaluate it. All right? How are we doing on time? We got a little bit more time for a couple more questions. Go ahead, please. Yeah, sure. Georgia. Sure, the brother's question is about the anti-BDS legislation that's been passed in a few different states around the country at this point, and that often has a box that you have to check off while you're filling out your form that says that you won't participate in boycotts against the state of Israel. And yes, we have gone after that in several different states. Fayez might be about to give us the straight information on Texas, because it's been a few rounds in Texas, and I don't remember them all sequentially. Do you remember? Because there was the brother who was an Arab, who initially we sued on behalf of him and won, and then the governor went back and sort of redid it. And I don't know if legislation is now, or at least litigation has come forward now on this new version.
And and that law court struck down, but then they modified it where Now, they cannot discriminate against individuals, but they can discriminate against corporations. And that's where the legal bound is not there. And then secondly, as you know, that the Texas legislature meets every other year. So we are trying. We last time when the legislative session happened, we tried to get this bill out there, but we were not able to gather enough support because like 70% of the Texas legislature is basically very conservative and behind this issue. So the legal battle, we did the legal battle through which it became a little bit better than what it originally was. But from a legislative standpoint, making a change is a big undertaking that we are kind of just nibbling on the edges of the issue. They put a certain limit that because I do not know have all the details. Maybe Shema may remember, but that 3 to 4 employees or something like that in the.
So I think what you're hearing from us, and forgive my not having all of that at my fingertips. Most time I do, is that we have sued, and it's a cyclical. Like we sue, they change. We sue, they change, and that's been the case in a number of states. That exactly mirrors a number of different places. So I want to move toward wrapping us up. And I appreciate all of you giving us some time out of your evening tonight. As they noted, tomorrow at 2:30, we'll be speaking nearby. Fayez has those details. I promise you it's not going to be a repeat of tonight. So if you want to hear more and continue the conversation, we're available tomorrow. But I just want you to, for a moment, think about some of the things I said earlier. This community here in Austin, nationally, American Muslims are not the punching bag we once were. We have much stronger institutions. We're not building mosques the way we used to. We're building schools, right? That's what you see a lot of nowadays. We're strengthening our civil society institutions. We're cranking out more lawyers, more academics, more entrepreneurs, all the things that you need for a healthy and vibrant community. So my thought for you all, I have heard a lot of anxiousness about the next administration. Politicians, Democrats or Republicans, are not coming to save us, right? If you think about the Republicans, Patriot Act, invasion of Iraq, Muslim ban. If you think about Democrats, countering violent extremism programs under Obama, the Biden-backed Gaza genocide, like neither of these parties is going to come and save us, so we can't wait on that. We build ourselves. We build our own power. We build from places like this so that we have mosques that can support schools and schools that produce more educated Muslims so that we have more attorneys coming into organizations like CAIR, and those are the people who will defend us. And in defending us, they defend all Americans and people worldwide because our religion says, be a benefit to humanity, avert harm from humanity. So my hope as you go away tonight is to feel encouraged by the strength that this community has built and realize that whatever this next administration brings, we've faced variations of it already over the last 20 years. And will it be a difficult time? Quite possibly. But the sun will rise the next day. Allah has a plan for us. And we can feel confident if we don't worry about what the Democrats and the Republicans are going to do to help us out, but we focus on what we can control, which is what are we going to do to help ourselves out. Jazakallah khair for your time tonight. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow morning. I can hang out and answer any more questions. And do we have any announcements we have to make before we? Nope, we're done. All right. Thank you all.